So as you note there, the session will be recorded. It's really for our internal purposes and for the purposes of informing other community leaders who might not have had a chance to attend this session or the next session, a chance to get a little bit more insight and input on our January 2021 cohort. So again, my name is Natasha Udugama. I'm the International and Community Engagement Program Manager for AGU's Thriving Earth Exchange. I am also joined by my colleagues from Thriving Earth Exchange, Melissa Goodwin, and also colleagues from AMS and ASTC, that's the American Meteorological Society and the Association of Science and Technology Centers, Leslie Markham and Tiernan Doyle, who will also introduce themselves momentarily and tell you a little bit more about their organizations. Maybe with that, I'll just pause for a second. I think it might be nice to know who else is on the line. So if you don't mind just briefly introducing yourself, name, organization, if applicable, and your role, as well as your community name, please. So I'll just call your name out as I see it on the screen. Leslie, you're first on my screen. Would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Sure. Hi, I'm Leslie Markham from the Association of Science and Technology Centers, which is the Association for Science Museums. And I'm the Senior Manager of Impact Initiatives and also the Program Manager for this particular project.
Thank you. I don't see the name, but I see the lady with blonde hair. If you don't mind introducing yourself, not Tiernan, and glasses. I'm sorry, I can't see your name right now for some reason. If you don't mind introducing yourself.
Okay, you said glasses, so I'm guessing.
Cindy Millard. Now I see it. Great. Yes.
My name is Cindy Millard. I'm with the Mabor Museum in Waco, Texas, and we're a natural science and cultural history museum. And just last year, this past year, we worked with Aztec on a fellowship that we've got going on. So we're very interested in what we're learning from these type of national collaborations that we've got. So that's kind of what we're here to find out information.
Excellent. Thank you, Cindy. Tiernan.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tiernan Doyle. I'm the Public Outreach and Engagement Specialist with the American Meteorological Society, and very excited to be working alongside Thriving Earth Exchange and Leslie with Aztec to create this cohort.
Great, thanks. There's another lady that's on camera. I'm sorry, I can't see your name either. If you don't mind introducing yourself.
Yanette.
It might be me.
Yanette.
Good morning. Well, good morning for us in San Diego, but good afternoon for all of you all. Yanette Lopez, Community Engagement Manager with the Fleet Science Center in San Diego, California.
Very cool. Thank you. Melissa.
Sorry, took a second to unmute. My name is Melissa Goodwin. I'm with AGU Thriving Earth Exchange as our Manager for Operations and Volunteer Engagement. Great to see you all.
Brad Peroni.
Hi, I'm Brad Peroni from Carnegie Science Center in Pittsburgh, and I'm a coordinator for community programs.
Excellent. Thanks, Brad. Ned Brockmeyer.
Sorry, yeah, one second. I'll get my video going. I'm out on my farm this morning, afternoon, I should say. My name is Ned Brockmeyer. I'm with Hilltop Urban Farm, and I was invited actually by the Carnegie Science Center as our community partner, and interested to hear the possibilities for this cohort. So thank you.
Hi, Ned.
Thank you. Angela Chalk, please.
Hi, this is Angela Chalk. I'm calling in from New Orleans. I'm the Executive Director for Healthy Community Services. It's a nonprofit organization based in the 7th Ward of the city. And Melissa, you'll be proud to know that even as we're speaking, we're preparing to plant an additional 155 trees in the neighborhood so that we can study the urban heat island effect. And we've also installed a an eco solar bench that can monitor our weather, and along with the sensors that we have placed to monitor heat and barometric pressure and rainfall and ultraviolet light now.
Excellent. Thank you, Angela. Catherine.
Hi, everyone. I'm Catherine Mercia-Baggett. I'm also in the car, so I might be sideways. I can't see myself, but anyways, all good. I'm with the City of Sandy Springs in Georgia. I'm the Sustainability Manager, and we're just starting off our program. So just trying to understand what's available and how we can build upon synergies that are already existing and just share knowledge.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. Well, with that, I will probably minimize so that I won't be able to necessarily see you all, but if you do have any questions during the course of this presentation, please either put it in the chat. My colleague Melissa will be watching that, but we will have time at the end of this to go through any questions you might have. So just to give you a sense of what the session is all about, we will provide you a brief introduction and overview of AGU's Thriving Earth Exchange, the American Meteorological Society, and the Association of Science and Technology Centers, if you're not already familiar. A few examples of some of the community science projects that Thriving Earth Exchange has done in the past. And through those examples, we'll describe a little bit about our typical project lifecycle, and then we'll get to Q&A. And of course, if you have any questions in the meantime, please just drop those in the chat. So just to give you a sense of who we are at Thriving Earth Exchange, it's important to know our parent organization. And our parent organization is the American Geophysical Union, otherwise known as AGU. And AGU is a professional society of earth and space scientists, over 200,000 affiliates and members who are located in 137 countries all over the world, who are doing research and publications around earth and space science. And our mission at AGU is to support and inspire a global community of individuals and organizations who are interested in advancing discovery in those earth and space sciences and its benefit for humanity and the environment. So to give you a little sense of how Thriving Earth Exchange is placed within AGU, about 8 years ago, our senior leadership got together and took a look at that AGU mission and realized that our mission at that time, because we've just since redesigned our strategic plan, we have a new strategic plan. At that time, our mission at Thriving Earth, or at AGU, was to promote discovery in earth and space science for the benefit of humanity. And so we realized when our senior leadership got together to sort of think about what to do for the centennial last year, we realized that our scientists are really good at research and publication in the earth and space sciences, but not necessarily addressing the second part of that mission, which was to benefit humanity. And so the idea became, well, how can we develop some kind of mechanism to bridge this gap between our earth and space scientists and humanity? And that became the Thriving Earth Exchange. And the Thriving Earth Exchange is essentially a program of the AGU that is leveraging our earth and space science members to work with communities of place and interest and action around the country and increasingly around the world to develop community science projects. But before I get into that, I'll tell you a little bit about our mission, which is to strengthen and enhance collaboration amongst communities, scientists, and partner organizations so that all communities can build healthy, resilient, thriving, just, and ecologically responsible futures. So our vision in that is that Thriving Earth Exchange become a leader in contributing to global well-being by supporting community awareness and application of science, and promoting equity by ensuring that all communities benefit from the opportunity to participate in, contribute to, and guide the use of scientific knowledge. So I mentioned this term community science. Community science is the the process by which scientists, our Earth and space scientists, and communities do science together to advance one or more community priorities. And as it relates to Thriving Earth Exchange and AGU science, climate, natural hazards, natural resources, environmental health issues, sustainability, and pollution. And it encourages those communities like yourselves, particularly those that are historically marginalized and oppressed, to guide, participate in, learn from, and benefit from the science that we offer. And you see a bunch of other names at the top of the slide here, but essentially what community science is basically embedded in these other types of methodologies of working with communities. It's most, like AGU, for instance, calls it solution science. It's also co-creation, it's co-production. It's oftentimes equated to citizen science, but we would say it's equated most equitably with extreme citizen science, where people actually develop the ideas and the priorities before the research and the science is brought in. So with that, I'll just turn it over to Tiernan to describe a little bit about the American Meteorological Society.
Thanks so much, Natasha. So as stated here, I'll get to our mission in a moment, but we also at AMS are another professional member society. So we have a whole almost 12,000 professionals, scientists, researchers, practitioners, and weather enthusiasts that make up the American Meteorological Society. And together, the society and its members are committed to advancing the atmospheric and related sciences, technologies, applications, and services. And then again, in the centennial here, AMS just had its 100-year anniversary, and those services for the benefit of the society has really been a kind of a new call to action for AMS, and really putting all of the research into pollution, into climate change, that our professional members provide and create has really been important to put that into use for community members, for society, and to make more of a on-the-ground impact through the professional research that these members are doing. So we publish 11 journals every year. There's a lot of peer-reviewed research that AMS does and provides, but at this 100-year anniversary, the society has really come to recognize that it can do more and should do more to put science into service for people on a day-to-day basis. So that's why we're really excited to be partnering with Thriving Earth Exchange and looking to put our scientists into action to do science together with communities, and to really collaborate with communities on priorities that will serve them every day. Whether that is, again, climate change focused, whether it is air quality and pollution, or water quality, anything like that, that our professional members do in their kind of research lives. We're also excited to now work more on that on the ground basis. Sorry, muted myself. But anyway, that's a bit about AMS, and I look forward to any questions that you have.
Thank you, Tiernan. Leslie.
Always helps to unmute yourself. So the Association of Science and Technology Centers, we call it ASTEC for short. It's a network of 700 plus science and technology centers and museums and nonprofits, companies, and other organizations that are focused on increasing the public understanding of and engagement with science and technology among all people. Collectively, our ASTEC members welcome about 110 million visitors through their doors each year in 50 countries. Now, obviously, in the time of COVID, that has not been the case this year, but they're ready and eager to re-welcome visitors as soon as it's safe to do so. So science museums engage the public in a wide array of scientific and technical topics, including physical, biological, natural and social sciences, engineering, mathematics, technology, and problem solving. ASTC includes a very wide breadth of science and technology centres. We also have natural history museums, children's museums, nature centres, aquariums, zoos, planetariums. And we have members in all 50 states in the United States. And our members can be found in urban areas and also in rural areas. And about half of our members are actually very small community serving institutions. And so they have small but very passionate staff. And then we obviously have some very large museums, which are much more well known, like the American Museum of Natural History in New York and the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History. So all of our members share a commitment to supporting lifelong learning, connecting science and society, engaging diverse communities, and partnering to tackle global and local challenges. So I just want to tell you a little bit about our community science initiatives. In 2018, ASTC did an extensive listening tour of our members to inform our new strategic direction. And we heard very clearly from our members that they wanted to deepen their connections in their communities and form new connections. So from this listening work, ASTC has developed several community science initiatives to connect and support our members in building their capacity for their own community science work. So what is community science to ASTC and our members? Community science is an emerging practice for us. We're really aiming at nurturing relationships between science and communities. So we're defining community very broadly as connected or organized groups of people who have a common geography or jurisdiction, a set of characteristics or interests and goals. And the way we describe community science, you'll hear a lot from Thriving Earth Exchange because they're such a great model for this work, and they're so kind of ahead of the curve on community science work. So our members take a wide variety of approaches to community science. Often because they're bricks and mortar place-based institutions, they have the ability to gather community members. And so some of the ways that they're currently engaging in community science could be through public dialogue and deliberation programs, looking at how science and technology innovation intersects with societal issues. And so some of those topics may be around flooding or driverless cars, hopefully not flooding and driverless cars at the same time. The other big area is co-creation and co-design with community members, especially around exhibits and programming. I mean, lots of our members have exhibits in their museums that depict things that are happening locally. And so having community members involved in developing those exhibits with their own local deep knowledge really helps to make sure that the exhibits are accurate and that they resonate with museum visitors. Natasha already mentioned citizen science projects. A good example of one of our members doing citizen science work is the Science Museum of Virginia, who have a project that involves their community members collecting data for heat mapping around the city of Richmond. And that data has been used to understand the impacts of climate change on the city and has been presented to local government officials for action. And then another area which is burgeoning in our community is environmental and social justice initiatives. And I think that type of collaboration with researchers is very much what we find in Thriving Earth Exchange's work. Some of our members are quite experienced in community science work and others are just beginning to explore it. So to support our members, we're continuing to listen to what they're doing and how we can support their work. And we're currently having a series of workshops with our members and other institutions and communities and individuals connected to community science so that we can crowdsource some good examples to share with the field. And we're developing a framework that highlights how community science can be done well within Aztec member institutions. And we hope that this will help our members to be able to train their staff within their museum to address community priorities and use the framework and experimental models to help understand community science and the community priorities. So we're very excited about this fellowship opportunity with Thriving Earth Exchange and the American Meteorological Society. And I look forward to hearing your questions about this endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leslie. So that's just a little showcase of our partners in this initiative, in this particular January 2021 initiative. And you'll have a chance to ask more questions of Leslie and Tiernan later on in the course of this hour. But I just want to take you quickly through what a community science project team might look like and some examples of some projects. So just so you know, you all, who are, as community leaders, are a very fundamental and important part of a community science project team. So what you bring to a community science project is the community context, the insights and connections from your community. You represent and speak on behalf of your community, and you engage widely within that community and ensure that the project is responsive to community priorities. It's relevant to your community and impactful in that community. Your community scientist, the person that would be brought on by your community science fellow, is the person who will bring scientific knowledge, insights, and connections. They will engage as representatives of the scientific community, whether it's AMS or AGU or Aztec, ensure that that science is relevant, responsive, and meaningful for community priorities. And then the community science fellow is your project manager. So this person will guide the team through your process of community science, ensure that the communication and coordination is happening between your scientists and your community leaders, and is that primary connecting point to Thriving Earth Exchange, AMS, and Aztec network and resources, and is the person who will be recruiting your scientists or group of scientists for your project. Projects within Thriving Earth Exchange community science process are networked, but they usually function independently. In this particular case, we're hoping that you all would function in something like a cohort so that you're able to share milestones, results, and other outputs with each other. The minimum of each of these participants on a community science project team is one per participant, so there's always one fellow. We recommend as much as possible that there be 2 community leaders. So there's one person who might be a primary and there might be someone who is a backup or a backstop. But even working together to make sure that there's always someone working with those community scientists and the fellow. And the community scientists are oftentimes variable. So as I mentioned, they can be one person or they can be up to 5 people. So as staff at the Thriving Earth Exchange, our role is to provide structure and support for all of these projects. And in this particular case, we'll be doing this alongside Aztec and AMS colleagues. So it's the project teams, you all as the community leaders, the fellows, and the scientists who will carry out these community science projects. So just to get into briefly our process, this is a brand new wheel of the AGU Thriving Earth Exchange process that gives you an overview of what you would go through should you become part of the Thriving Earth Exchange AMS Aztec cohort in January 2021. So when your fellows will essentially be trained in this process starting at the end of January in a 2-day training period. So you don't necessarily need to know this by heart or anything, but this is essentially to give you a sense of what our process is all about and what you could expect during these 3 different phases. So scope in the top part of the screen is all about turning your community idea into an actionable project that our scientists can work with you on. So essentially your community science fellow would take you through a series of scoping conversations, simple phone conversations to really get a better sense of what your project is all about. Once you have iterated with your community science fellow on what that project could look like, your fellow will develop a project description, which will be the culmination of that scope phase. Using that project description, we then move into match, and your community science fellow is essentially looking for a scientist or group of scientists that match the description that you've asked for to work with you on that specific project. So match is all about finding the appropriate scientific candidates to join your community science team. And your community science fellow will go through a series of interviews with different candidates. They will get references, and then they will provide recommendations to you as community leaders as to who would be best suited to work on your project. So at the end of match, you get an opportunity to choose who you'd like to work with on that team. And match essentially culminates with an introduction call between you and your scientists, and you get an opportunity to decide whether or not you want to work with those scientists. Once you're happy with the scientists that you have chosen, you then move into solve. And solve is all about doing your 6 to 18 month project. Each of these projects tend to last between 6 and 18 months. It really depends on what exactly that project is to determine the timeline. In this particular phase, you'll work with your community science fellow and your community scientists to develop a project plan and realize the milestones that you have co-created together. In addition to this, you'll also be creating a communications plan. Your community science fellow will not just leave you here. That person will essentially take you through the implementation of your plan and ensure that you get to the outputs that you have planned throughout the period of 6 to 18 months. And then essentially share is, and the revision to our process is that share used to be the 4th phase of our process, but now it's not, because share actually is a very important part of all Thriving Earth Exchange community science projects, in that it is happening throughout all 3 phases. And it's about sharing those project insights, those milestones, those results and outcomes throughout all phases of community science project. So I'll describe a little bit of what that looks like through a couple of examples. Back in 2016, Thriving Earth Exchange worked with the town of Berlin, Maryland on a project to convert land that was originally used as a poultry plant to develop it into a town recreational area. The town had hired some consultants to determine what remediation needs they needed for that plant. However, it needed microbiological assessment of the ponds at the site in order to ascertain that that project, the projected recreation area, could indeed be used by the public for swimming, for kayaking, and other recreational purposes. So the way that we connected with this community was through one of what we call our community-facing partner organizations. There, that logo just above our logo, the International City and County Managers Association. And they recommended that we work with the town manager, Laura Allen, who's pictured in this on the slide. And we then sort of connected with Laura to discuss what that priority was around those ponds. What exactly did she need? And so in the scoping phase, we basically talked to her about what that project might look like that could use an AGU scientist or an AMS scientist. What strengths does the community have? What are those communities' challenges and priorities? And how does that idea connect to the earth and space sciences? And then what essentially is that scientist going to contribute? So by doing that, we learned that, of course, Laura Allen was very interested in the scientists monitoring and testing the water on that former poultry plant property. and determining what the cost of remediation might be. Once that testing was complete, the town would then like the scientists to provide remediation options and design options to limit the problem. So then moving into match, once we had developed that project description and it was agreed upon by Laura Allen and her team, the match part of the process began. And this involved recruiting pro bono scientists. And so just to note, all of the scientists who work on Thriving Earth Exchange projects, including this January 2021 cohort, they all work as volunteers on these projects. So we then looked to our databases to try to find the right pro bono scientists to co-lead a project with Laura Allen and her team. Berlin was particularly interested in a scientist who had a background in hydrology, specifically pond remediation techniques, that they had the ability to operate effectively in environments where science is not the only factor and often not always the leading factor in decision making. And they were looking for someone who had approachability. Experience dealing with the press, public, and elected officials was for them very beneficial. And then they also wanted the ability to interact either in person or remotely with Berlin, Maryland. Now we understand that we're living in very different times than 2016. So it might be the case that your interactions with your scientists would be mostly remotely to start with, but that has never precluded our scientists from working with communities. So we then found several scientists and recommended them to Laura Allen. Of those that were recommended, Laura decided on Dr. Ellen Silbergeld, who's pictured on this slide, of Johns Hopkins University. She's an environmental public health specialist. And once they were introduced to each other on an introductory phone call, but in this particular case, it was an introductory meeting in person in Berlin, and they had a chance to talk to one another, they then decided this was a go. They were ready to go forward, and it was a match. So, you know, when we were looking for the right types of scientists, these are some of the questions that we asked. What kind of scientist is needed? Who they would prefer? Do they want someone with a good sense of humor? Do they want someone who's able to like drive easily to the site? And what other types of skills should they have? So once Laura decided on Ellen Silbergeld, they then moved into the solve phase. And in the case of Berlin, they came up with a sampling plan and decided that when that sampling plan would be executed, how those samples would be analyzed and documented, and finally, what the presentation format would be. In their particular case, they wanted a presentation to their city council. And throughout the project, Berlin was particularly successful in getting local coverage of the project's trajectory because Laura Allen had very good ties with their local Bayside Gazette, pictured here on the slide. And the Thriving Earth Exchange, meanwhile, was providing ongoing coaching and connections in order to get the project to go from a concept to impact in the community. So that's essentially what back then staff were doing, but this is what your community science fellow would do, is to provide that ongoing coaching and connections to make an impact in that community, in your community. And then back in the old days, as I mentioned, share was our final, but share is something that happens again throughout all three phases. So in this particular case, the share stories and lessons learned from the collaboration were shared at the city council meetings, and they produced a microbiological analysis of the sediment, sampling of one area of that pond in that facility. And the results of this project were that they did not need to do any microbiological remediation, which actually meant that the town was able to take immediate steps to not remediate the ponds and thus save them approximately $7 million in remediation costs, which was a huge win for the team. And so just briefly, I want to just talk about another example, and then there's another example from the Boston area. The Metropolitan Area Planning Commission of Boston asked us to do a flood risk assessment of a food distribution center that actually serves 12 million people in the New England region. And it's located in between two smaller greater Boston area communities, and very much flood prone based on the fact that it's on Lake Charles. So the team of scientists in this particular case were able to work with the regional government to develop a storm surge analysis and sea level rise projections, which were then integrated within the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission's climate change plan, and eventually presented to the mayor of Boston as well. So just as a reminder, community science is all about community voice coming first. All communities like yours deserve access to science to advance your priorities. And science is a tool to help drive solutions. We want to stress and emphasize that science is just one tool in the toolkit of developing solutions. We fundamentally believe that all communities come to the table with context, knowledge, and expertise that is on par with the science that we offer, and is as important to integrate within the tools and solutions that are developed in these projects. And these short-term immediate impacts often seed a long-term culture of community science. So by working together in this manner, we're hoping to eventually have more of a culture of scientists working closely with community leaders like yourselves. So with that, I will just stop talking and give you an opportunity to ask some questions. We have about 20 minutes, give or take. If you all have questions, you can either raise your hand, or you can also just populate them in the chat. Please do not be shy. I'm sure I didn't touch on all your questions. I think I see, I think, is it Ned? You have your hand up? I'm sorry. Again, I can't see your name. I don't know what's happening.
Brad has his hand up.
Brad, sorry. Brad.
Yeah. So for an institution that isn't currently engaged in this kind of work, but who is interested in the possibilities, one of our considerations is how much time a project like this one would take. So realistically, I know it's going to be different in every single case, but does this seem like something that would be a quarter of a full-time position, a full-time workload? What's the expectation there?
That's a great question, Brad. Just to clarify, are you from a museum, and
yes.
Would you be applying as a fellow?
Yes.
Okay. So that's a little different. This is essentially for community leaders. So for a community leader, it would essentially take about 2 to 3 hours a week to work with a fellow. And so it would be approximately the same amount of time, except that in the scoping phase for a fellow, it does tend to take a little bit more time, depending, because it requires having a series of phone calls, and sort of making the time to do scope and match tend to take a little bit more time, doing the interviewing, looking for the scientists, making the references. So in the first couple of months, you might be spending much more than once you're in the solve phase. And Melissa, please feel free to chime in on this question, because I can't exactly recall the amount of time specifically. It does vary though a lot, Brad, so.
Yeah, it varies from project to project. The ballpark estimate that we're able to provide is that during scope and match, it's about 3 to 4 hours a week for a fellow. And then afterwards, once the volunteer scientist is on board, maybe 3 or 4 hours a month.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Any questions for our partners at AMS and ASTC? Leslie and Tiernan are also chomping at the bit to answer your questions. Okay, well, oh, okay, Cindy, please.
I'm sorry. What other deliverables say is the fellow expected besides the project as a whole? Participation in other meetings with the cohorts, or?
For the fellow, yeah, good question. So for the fellow, not for the community leaders, the fellow is expected, of course, to go through a 2-day training. And in addition to that, they would participate, in addition to working on your specific project, they would be also participating in monthly fellow meetings with the other fellows in this cohort. And basically providing providing communication and support to like liaising with Thriving Earth Exchange, AMS, and ASTC about how your projects are going, any milestones and things like that.
That answers my question. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Natasha, this is Angela.
Yes,
I have a question. I don't know if this has been asked or not while I was transitioning, but how is it possible for one to be both a fellow and a community leader, or how does that come about with one becoming a fellow?
That's a really good question, Angela, because you've done a project with us before we had this fellow. And
is it too late to become a fellow?
Oh, it's not too late to become a fellow. We're currently in the process of looking for both community leader applications and fellow applications. In terms of being both a community leader and a fellow, I think that would be a conflict of interest, because essentially, I mean, it might be difficult, for one thing, as a community leader to also be a fellow, unless you are willing to. I don't know. We haven't actually had that question before. Melissa, do you have any thoughts on that? Like, how would?
Because could I be both my fellow and my community leader? That's what I was getting at.
Angela, we might have to talk offline about how that could work. What I would say is probably it would be tough to serve both roles. But I think, Angela, you would make a marvelous fellow for another community leader, really helping them learn and apply this process. But we can follow up about that more.
Yeah.
I don't have a question. I just wanted to say that my organization is in the scoping phase, and we really like our fellow. She's great, and we also have one scientist that was selected for us that we're working with already. We're in the scoping. We're looking at other possibilities, and I can just report that we're really happy with this, and I'm very impressed with this whole process. I've been a community organizer for 40 years, actually longer than that, but as a profession. And this is my organization that we're doing this through, and it's a struggling organization. It's in the middle of something really big and bad that I won't live to see finally cleaned up, but this is amazing, and I really thank all of you for this structure and putting all of this together. I know you're going to help and have helped a lot of communities, and it's helping us, and I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Earl. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, we're a watershed with 10 Indian tribes that are impacted by our issue, which is flooding in the country's largest Superfund site. I'm Cherokee and Shawnee, and most of our board and staff are Native. We're open to everyone, and we've been wallowing in this for decades, and y'all are really helping, and I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Earl. I'm really happy to hear that. You're based in Oklahoma, right? I think I'm recalling now.
Yeah, extreme northeast corner of Oklahoma.
Right. Right.
Grand River.
Excellent. Thank you.
Cool.
So I think I'd like to build on what Earl just said about the fact that so many of these projects are, you know, way beyond just the length of this particular fellowship. So it's not that the fellow is hoping to come to some sort of resolution of a problem, but it is helping to provide data and you know, help build on the community's priorities and not try and fix anything per se, because the issues are very significant in many communities. So I think that for a lot of people, when they do a project, they think they're going to start it and finish it, you know, but that's just not going to be the case for many of these projects. And also just commenting on the fact that the materials that Thriving Earth Exchange provide and their training, I mean, I've sat in on the last cohort training, as did Tin, and I was just blown away by the level of detail and the amazing help that Thriving Earth Exchange provide to their communities and scientists that they're working with.
Thank you, Leslie. Any other final questions or comments, clarifications?
There's a request in the chat to share the slides.
Oh, sure. Yes, we can certainly share the slides. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Melissa. Yes, Janet. And so I just want to remind all of you that if you're interested in making an application, our application deadline for the January 2021 cohort is November 6th. So please do let us know if you have any further questions between now and then. We'll be happy to take your questions, clarify anything else. And that'll be an opportunity to get your project ideas in for the January 2021 cohort. Just to let you all know that what that would mean is that your projects would most likely start in February of 2021, because our fellows will be trained by the end of January 2021. And then soon after, thank you, Melissa, soon after you will be connected with that fellow, and then you'll be able to start that scoping process and move forward.